Welcome to Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss and discover the challenges and triumphs of those living with NLD, nonverbal learning disability, and other learning challenges such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, and any other invisible learning differences that one may live with. And I like to interview individuals as well who live with various learning challenges. So if you know anybody, please point me their way, or if you are that individual, I would love to interview you on various topics. So please let me know. And I welcome you to this podcast. All right, so this will be the last podcast I will record in my parents' home. I am going to be moving into my townhouse this weekend. So next weekend, it will be recording from there, and I will have to figure out what kind of setup I will want there. Haven't quite figured that out yet. So math was always challenging for me when I was growing up. I had so many math tutors. I remember one day I had three of them come at different times to help me with my homework. That was too much for me that day, but it did help a lot. It made it easier so I wasn't so frustrated with myself all the time and crying because I couldn't get it. And I didn't understand why it was so challenging until I was in college and got diagnosed with NLD at age 19. Yes, sometimes I wish I knew why things were challenging for me sooner, but I think it was at the right moment because I was able to turn my grades around from barely passing in C's to B's and A's. I did that with tutors, accommodations, and a lot of help from my professors and my mom with working on my schoolwork. I wouldn't have been able to graduate without the help from my mom, GSI's brother, tutors, and professors. Not only did I get into UC Berkeley, but I graduated from it with a whole village of wonderful, smart, patient, and kind people helping me along the way. And luckily, that didn't stop when I graduated. It became different though, because now I was using the skills of determination, discipline, persistence, and time management I learned from college in the working world. Even though I don't use math the same way I did in my academic life, I do use in my personal life and still have some challenges with it today. So, this is a quote from AI. People with nonverbal learning disability and LD or NVLD may have difficulty with mental math due to visual spatial perception issues. These issues can make it difficult to recognize patterns and relationships, which can affect math skills like generalization. For example, someone with NLD might not be able to see what's similar between different math problems. One study found that children with NLD have had difficulty with a dots comparison task, but not with mental calculations. Close quote. The first article is titled A Teacher's Guide to NVLD: How to Support Students with Nonverbal Learning Disability from BCCES, which is the global leader in training and certification for healthcare professionals, educators, and corporate partners who work with individuals with autism and other cognitive disorders. Our reach extends to more than 2 million people in all 50 states and over 70 countries around the globe. IBCCES member learning community is provided as a free service to all IBCCES members who have completed one or more of our training and certification programs. Close quote. And the quote from that article: understanding part whole relationships, a child with NVLD may avoid puzzles, Legos, and other activities that depend on arranging small pieces into large parts. Have trouble with math concepts like greater than or less than, fractions, etc. struggle to identify the main idea of the story they've read, though they can recount details, show difficulty grasping cause and effect, learning sequence and patterns. Math is often a difficult subject for students with NBLD as they struggle to learn procedures like long division and apply concepts to multiple steps problems. Make the intangible tangible, especially for math and geography, using manipulatives like Cuisenaire rods, 3D models, and globes when teaching visual spatial concepts to help students understand how things relate to one another, close quote. So that definitely gives some good strategies and suggestions and skills that teachers can use for neurodiverse students with NBLD. And this may also apply to other students that have challenges with mental math, memorizing symbols, and remembering how to use certain mathematical concepts or formulas. I remember when I was in college, I retook statistics at Miramar College because I didn't pass it at Berkeley, because really my own fault. I didn't really have the motivation to go to class because in the afternoon instead of in the morning, and I prefer it to be in the morning. So I retook it at Miramar College, and I passed it with I think a B or almost an A. Forget now. That was so long ago. But there was only one tutor there, so I was basically learning how to do it on my own. And I learned how to do it just by repetition of going through the stuff, homework assignments, until I got it. And I looked up stuff online. I wrote cheat sheets of the formulas so I didn't have to memorize them, because I'm not very good at memorizing formulas with all those symbols. I can memorize how to use them, but I'm not very good at memorizing symbols. So that was helpful. And I used a calculator and had extra time on the test, an extra hour and a half. I'm going to get some water before reading the next article. The next article is titled Understanding Nonverbal Learning Disorders, NBLD, by D. Ray Kinder, who has a PhD and an HSPP, whatever that means. Quote, what follows are some common symptoms seen in individuals with NBLD or NLD. Do not expect every individual with this syndrome, however, to have an identical patterns of symptoms. NBLD varies in its presentation depending on the individual, much like the symptoms of ASD in people with that diagnosis. Nonverbal learning disorder is a brain-based condition probably affecting the Right CRG newsletter, winter edition, February 2019, volume 9, page 2, hemisphere. Characterized by weaknesses in nonverbal processing, that is, the ability to think and reason without the use of language. Symptoms include weakness in the following: visual spatial reasoning, puzzles building, organization and synthesis of information, big picture thinking, visual recall, where is the car, where is the exit, spatial motoric integration, drawing, fine motor skills, clumsy, social interpretive skills, reading body language, facial expression, understanding math concepts, story applied problems, understanding abstract concepts or slavery during the Civil War, federalism, organizational skills, how we organize space and time, literal interpretations, difficulty with sarcasm or innuendo, change and prefer sameness. Sometimes we see middle school at CRG with a question of whether they have ASD. They may not have some of the classic symptoms. For example, they have good eye contact and appropriate greeting skills associated with that disorder. We learn that their parents have worked extensively to teach them these skills. Similarly, some young people with NVLD have learned to verbally mediate many of the above tasks. In fact, one of the key ways to help them cope with their weaknesses is to teach them to verbally, sequentially process as much information as possible. Unfortunately, not all tasks or learning environments lend themselves to this type of processing. Tasks requiring visual spatial reasoning are particularly difficult to verbally mediate. Applied math concepts, for example, draw heavily on spatial reasoning skills. While you can verbally sequentially talk yourself through an algebra problem, recalling verbal rules as you go, applied geometry is a higher challenge and generally requires spatial thought. But simpler tasks do as well, such as drawing a cube or a three-dimensional drawing, reading, in quotes, maps, and parallel parking. In my experience, impaired visual spatial processing is the key to understanding this disorder. I hope this central diagnostic trait will provide the key to a uniform definition of NVLD with a DSM and special education classification to follow. As mental health providers and psychologists, we strive to accurately diagnose individuals. We believe that accurate diagnoses are key to the most effective treatment plans. At CRG, we believe that a quality assessment is usually the first step to identifying all of the issues that are adversely impacting an individual's functioning. NVLD cannot be accurately identified and may go undetected without an IQ test or at least significant visual spatial measures contrasted with visual measures. Once we know this about an individual and whether they also need treatment for their level of anxiety and or attention deficit, we then strive to provide them with a comprehensive treatment plan. The adverse impact of NVLD will be the contingent upon its severity, how early it is diagnosed, and the ability of the individual to compensate for it. It will have a bearing on what classes, math, higher sciences, will be more challenging and what learning strategies the student should use in those cases. The impact of CRG Newsletter, Winter Edition, February 2019, Volume 9-1, page 3. NVLD will also have implications for individuals' career path. In general, people with NVLD will do better in fields where they can utilize their verbal sequential processing skills, for example, sales, law, service, industry, and will need to avoid careers requiring visual spatial processing like engineering and physics. Close quote. So that article did a good job of describing the challenges of NVLD and and it also did a good job of saying, hey, I've said this before, when you've met one neurodivergent, you met one neurodivergent, meaning each of us may have all the symptoms or different symptoms to different degrees. Like the autism spectrum, you can be high functioning or low functioning. You can have higher needs or low needs, whichever term you prefer to use. And You can be very good at driving, or you cannot be very good at driving with NVLD, or you can not drive at all. You can be very good at math by learning how to do it with tutors and help, and you can be very good at balancing your budget as well with the help. And some people with NVLD are very good at communicating verbally, and some aren't. Um, and some are very good at memorizing things through audio. Some are better with visual. Um, I'm better with audio and kinesthetic learning. Visual is my worst. Um, so those are some examples. And some people are better at multitasking than others with NVLD. I've gone better at it over the years because I've had to get better at it. Okay, the last article is titled Nonverbal Learning Disorder, reviewed by Psychology Today staff. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold, so I might sound a little scratchy in my voice. In general, NVLD involves problems managing visual spatial information such as difficulty drawing, writing, or telling time using analog clocks. Tasks that require motor coordination such as tying one's shoes may also be impaired. NVLD may also include problems with executive functioning and higher order information processing, math, and social skills. It is important to note that only one or two skill sets may be compromised in NVLD, and not all. If a child's intellectual abilities are strong in all but one or more of these areas, testing for NVLD may be warranted. The signs and symptoms of a nonverbal learning disorder are difficult to pinpoint, as many deficits potentially fall under the umbrella term, and most children will not exhibit all of them. In other words, it can look very different in one child than it does in another. The condition is not defined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM Volume 5, although some advocates believe it should be. Typically, though, in spite of a large vocabulary and strong language memory and verbal skills, a child with NVLD will have difficulty with reading comprehension and more advanced math problems that require spatial visualization or pattern recognition. They may have a poor sense of direction and struggle to manage money. Deficits in fine and gross motor skills can lead to trouble with handwriting, using scissors and other tools, riding a bicycle, or participating in sports. Other children may see them as clumsy. Is nonverbal learning disorder on the autism spectrum? Some experts argue that in certain cases, NVLD and autism spectrum disorder may be the same condition viewed from different perspectives. Behavior attributed to the high-functioning autism, once known as Asperger's syndrome, in particular bears similarities to NVLD, but there are important differences. Specifically, while a child with either condition might have both excellent memorization skills and poor social skills, individuals with NVLD have particular difficulty taking in information from the visual environment, as well as trouble with math, which is often taught in a visual context. These processing difficulties are shared by some with ASD, but not all. Still, some approaches used to help children with ASD can also help those with NVLD. Close quote. So that article was basically giving you more challenges that people have with NVLD, more challenges. Sorry, I mean, tongue-tied. Was giving you more symptoms that people with NVLD have. And it brought up the DSM, and why it's not on there is because there's no one agreed upon definition of NVLD yet. The NVLD project is working on that. And basically, they changed the name recently. I did an episode on this earlier this year to developmental visual spatial disorder. That's still a mouthful. I don't really think that's any better than NVLD personally because both of them are focusing on nonverbal or developmental visual spatial. And it's really a whole spectrum of symptoms. Um, the name I came up with is invisible learning spectrum disorder. Now, that is a mouthful, but it has the word invisible in it and it has the word learning in it and spectrum, which I think is better, like autism spectrum disorder. That's basically what it should be. And yes, there are some similarities between autism and NBLD, but I would say what the main differences would be that somebody with autism can actually be very good at math and sciences. Somebody with NLD can be very bad at math and sciences. So that's the main difference. And somebody with autism usually can drive after learning it. But somebody with NLD may not be able to drive. So that's also a difference. The social things are the similarity with autism and NBLD. Both of them have challenges with sarcasm and reading nonverbal communication, which is basically 80 or 90% of communication. And both of them are very good at memorizing things, and both are very good at fixating on one task and liking routines, and also just liking the sameness and not really liking changes. So I hope this episode was helpful information for you on the challenges with NBLD with math and other areas, and comparing it to autism, and talking about how I use it in my academic, personal, and professional life. So that was today's episode, and I will talk to you guys next week. Before I go into that,
I hope
thought
that
I would
episode
address
was
that
well worth
this
it for
election
you to
is
listen
going to be
to, and
very
that you
important, and
were able to
I'm
take
not
something
telling you
away
how to
from it.
vote. I'm just encouraging
Even if
you
you
to
don't have a
vote.
learning challenge,
If
or
you
if
are
you do,
18
I
years
hope it
old or
was
older, I
extra
encourage you to
worthwhile
vote and
for
to do
you
a
so
lot
that
of
you
research so that you
are
are
able to
informed on
learn
what you're
something
voting
and
on,
maybe
and
journal
that
and
you
jot
are
down
able
some few
to
takeaways so that the next
do
time you experience that challenge yourself, you're able
I
to
guess do well with the voting process and be informed on it.
learn how to
And
breathe
I
through it
am
more
also
easily,
an
or
ambassador for an
maybe not
NBLD
have a
project,
meltdown or a tantrum,
and then
or
NBLD project is trying to
be able
get
to take
the
away more learning from it and
NBLD back
not
on the
make the same mistake
DSM,
twice,
which is
and
a
be
manual
able to
for
also help
mental
somebody else go
and
through
learning
that experience
disabilities,
if you have a
and it
friend who
helps
has a
people
learning
get
difference
accommodations in school,
and you are neurotypical. So I
life
hope
by
you
defining
will be
what
able to
the
have some experiences in your
disability
life now
is and
that you
how
have
it
listened to
affects
this
you in
episode.
life, and